Welcome, everyone, and especially to our visitors to this online gathering of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Bowling Green. My name is Krystina Krueger, and I will be your service associate today on this lovely, stormy morning. We are a welcoming congregation. Whoever you are, however you identify, wherever you come from, and whoever you love, you are welcome here. Our Sunday services are different each week, so that we can honor and learn from our wide array of traditions and beliefs. Today, our speaker is Mary Grayson Batts, a voting rights advocate and former UCBG member. We'll discuss voting rights, felony disenfranchisement, and the impact of suffrage injustice on our beloved communities. Though we walk each on our own path, here in this place and now at this time, we journey together as one community. For Unitarian Universalists, the flaming chalice is a symbol of the light of learning and the love of our community. This morning, our chalice will be lit by Michele Steiner. And of course, as our congregation's chalice is lit, you're welcome to join us in singing Rise Up, O Flame.
Rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing, show to us beauty, vision, and joy.
Thank you, Michele. Also this morning, Michele will also be giving our opening reading.
Good morning. Our first reading today will be, 502. Of course, you don't have your hymnal, maybe. Now is the accepted time, not tomorrow, not some more convenient season. It is today our best work can be done, and not some future day or future year. It is today we fit ourselves with the greater usefulness of tomorrow. Today is the seed time. Now are the hours of work, and tomorrow comes the harvest and the playtime. This takes us to our first hymn, Love Will Guide Us, number 131.
Thank you, Michele and Forrest. This place and the work we do is supported by the voluntary generosity of all who contribute. The offering is a sacrament of the free church. The offering will be given and received in a great appreciation of our grateful and of our shared hopes and values. While we listen to the offertory music, we invite you to go to the website shown on the screen and donate there, or write a check and prepare it for mailing. We thank you for these gifts. May we use them wisely in the service of our congregation and community. We will now have a few moments for meditation, reflection, and prayer. The singing bowl will lead us into silence. After the silence, we will sing Spirit of Life. You're welcome to sing along.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
As mentioned earlier, Unitarian Universalists have a wide array of beliefs, and the speakers of our Sunday services come from many traditions. Here to share her own thoughts today is Mary Grayson Batts. Mary Grayson Batts grew up in this church. She traveled the country while working on several local, state, and national political campaigns. It was during this time she became passionate about voting rights and access. She's currently studying graphic design and political science with plans to pursue a law degree and career in voter protection. She lives in St. Louis with her partner, Logan Fentress. Except during pandemics, she can be found in crowds with a voter registration clipboard in hand.
Good morning. Here's a question that I've been asking myself lately. What makes you a citizen? Is it being born here or taking a test to become naturalized? Is it paying taxes, investing in your community, serving on a jury? What about the right to vote? As UUs, we share a set of values named in the 7 principles. We value the inherent worth and dignity of every person, an interconnected web of existence, and the use of the democratic process. In 2019, the Unitarian Universalist Association issued a statement of conscience declaring that democracy is an ethical ideal, a moral and spiritual way of relating to one another. The late Congressman John Lewis considered voting as a kind of spiritual act. He said that the right to vote is precious, almost sacred. The right to cast a vote was personal for him. From his teenage years until his very last days on earth, John Lewis dedicated himself to the promise of our democracy. He had to do this because of the very real forces that pushed back against him and his fellow campaigners. And to be clear, when I say forces, I'm not talking about some abstract thing. It was people. There were so many powerful people committed to standing in John Lewis's way to the ballot box. We sometimes think of these stories like John Lewis's as the heroic legends of our past. We like to think that the arc of the universe has been bent towards justice and we finally won the right to vote. And unless we've had the personal experience, many of us don't realize that today, millions of Americans are still disenfranchised by some of the same Jim Crow era laws that have silenced our parents' and grandparents' generations. So today I'd like to talk to you about the thing that I care about almost more than anything else in the world, voting rights, and specifically the disenfranchisement of people convicted of felonies. I'll give you a brief history of felon disenfranchisement. During the Reconstruction era that followed the Civil War, Black men were allowed to vote for the first time, and amazingly, during this time, more than 2,000 Black office holders served across every level of government, including both houses of Congress. But when Reconstruction ended, what followed was a violent rollback of rights, especially in the South. Southern states adopted new state constitutions during this period. Many of them included blanket, lifetime bans on voting for anyone convicted of a felony. And they weren't exactly shy about their intentions with this. The president of Alabama's 1901 Constitutional Convention explained that these measures were meant to be, quote, within the limits imposed by the federal Constitution to establish white supremacy. Over time, most of these state laws have been removed and voting restrictions have been eased. Most recently, Florida passed a ballot measure in 2018 to repeal their voting ban. So today, there's just 3 state constitutions that still include a ban on voting for anyone convicted of a felony for the rest of their life, absent an individual pardon from the governor: Virginia, Iowa, and Kentucky. The impact of these policies is severe. In 2016, it's estimated that over 6 million citizens across the country couldn't vote due to a felony conviction. And much like the writers of these laws intended, the impact is disproportionately felt by people of color, especially Black people, and especially in the South. In 2016, a full 26% of the population of Black voting age Kentuckians were disenfranchised, and Florida, Tennessee, and Virginia saw similar rates. It's really hard to overstate how much of an injustice this is. There's a very old legal term that I've become familiar with. So although the use of disenfranchisement like this really came into fashion and became weaponized in America after the Civil War, the concept of losing citizenship rights as a punishment for a crime is at least as old as ancient Greece. And back then they called it civil death. It's a really useful term to describe how it feels to be cast out in the eyes of your community. Civil death. We're all hurt by this. Leaving out so many voices at election time means that our public life is drained of so much richness. When so many people in already marginalized communities are denied the vote for so long, a dark cloud of disfranchisement rolls in. Over time, the myths and misinformation about who's eligible to vote, the complicated restoration processes, as well as just understandable cynicism about the process in general, leads so many who are otherwise eligible to sit elections out. Candidates for office with very scarce time and resources know this, and they often don't bother reaching out to these communities as potential voters. And lawmakers write policies that don't speak to their needs. And so the cycle of disfranchisement continues to dig deeper holes through our democracy. Individuals who are denied the franchise are hurt too. Having a say means a lot to a person, and being denied that say can make you feel as if you don't matter. An Alabama citizen named Morio, whose rights were recently restored, says, "For 25 years, I felt like an outcast in society because of the legal system. I couldn't speak up about issues that mattered to me. I felt like all my choices had been taken away." He says that having the right to vote now makes him finally feel like part of a society again. Travis from Iowa says, "When I lost my rights, I felt like I lost my voice. I felt lower as a citizen. I want to be a part of the community, but if I don't have a say, I feel like I'm just watching from the sidelines." And a voting rights hero of mine from here in Kentucky, Tana Fogel, is an advocate working with the grassroots group Kentuckians for the Commonwealth, who speaks out about her experience with this. She says that when she tells her story, it's to let the community, the state of Kentucky, and the nation know that just because I had made a mistake didn't mean that I was a mistake. Tana says the voting ban in Kentucky pushes her to ask over and over, "Can you see us? We're here. We want to be engaged. We want to be valued. We are whole people." Silencing these voices has cost us dearly. There's an idea that in the history of a democracy, The way that we set the boundaries of who is allowed to vote and who isn't is a way of defining the community. We can call it people building. We're defining the electorate and we're building a people. As UUs, we are called to make sure that no one is left out of our people. That 2019 UUA Statement of Conscience reads, "Excluding our neighbors' voices impoverishes our souls. Hearing all voices expands our spirits. Our faith calls us to live into the requirements of real democracy." We believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person, even if they make mistakes, even if there's prison walls between them and us. We don't believe in casting people out of our beloved community. We hear Tana's call and we see her. She is a whole person. As for me, I care about voting rights so much because of the stories that I've collected and carry in my heart. As a campaign organizer, I spent a few years driving around the country to mobilize voters, registering people to vote, and trying to turn voters out to the polls. And I've spoken to a ton of people about voting and tried my best to answer their questions. And usually the answer that I really wanted to give was that it just shouldn't be this hard. I remember standing in front of a rural Ohio Walmart with a voter registration clipboard as a man asked me if his decades-old conviction disqualified him from voting. He had thought that for years. In fact, I've had a lot of conversations like that. One summer evening, I was standing on a voter's doorstep in Virginia, an older Black man, as he told me all about how when he first registered to vote, his dad helped him memorize the Declaration of Independence so that he could pass the registrar's literacy test. And he had never missed an election since then. After I left Virginia, my candidate ran again, and so I watched on TV as one of the most dedicated public servants that I've ever known lost her race with a coin flip because a handful of spoiled ballots led to a dead even tie, and every vote really counted. And then I came back home to Kentucky for a while. And finally, a few years ago, I got to sit in a courtroom with my dad as a judge signed our petition to expunge his record. And with that signature, my dad regained his right to vote after 15 years of being left out. After all this, I know beyond a doubt that it should not be this hard to vote in America. And by the way, if you're curious, I'd love to talk more about this during our coffee hour after the service in an international perspective. The short answer is that America is basically alone on this. Every foreign court that's evaluated the really limited disenfranchisement laws of other countries have found them to be, quote, inconsistent with democratic principles. But for now, there is some good news. We UUs in Kentucky have a chance to help make it a little easier for some of our fellow citizens to vote. So late last year, our governor signed an executive order that restored voting rights to not all, but over half of the disenfranchised Kentuckians with felony convictions. It's about 140,000 people. The thing is, no one necessarily reaches out to tell all those people that they got their rights back. And so a lot of people don't realize that they're eligible to vote now. So a coalition of UU churches in Kentucky is joining forces with that group, Kentuckians for the Commonwealth, to help folks get this information and get registered. Our group is called KUJAN, which stands for the Kentucky Unitarian Universalist Justice Action Network. It's kind of a mouthful. We've been gathering on Zoom Wednesday evenings for phone banks, calling folks that we think are affected by the new rules to help get folks registered before the deadline on October the 5th. So there's a few more weeks left. Volunteers who are trained on this can also make calls anytime on the other days too. And Lisa Del Porto has done a really great job coordinating this work. And I'm really proud of our Bowling Green Church specifically for showing up in a big way at these phone banks. It's really important work. And I invite you to reach out to Lisa or to me for more information about getting involved. Doing this work requires deep hope and resolve. I hope that you'll join me in imagining a better democracy. I promise it's possible. So I'll leave you with this thought. When we tell the story of American democracy, we usually speak of rights that we've gradually won. The suffragists winning votes for women, civil rights marches fighting for Black Americans' voting rights. But the right to vote isn't a prize to be won. It's not like dessert that you don't get to eat if you've been bad that day. The right to vote should be basic and inalienable. It should be the baseline standard that we expect for every single citizen. Accepting anything less than that has eaten holes through our democracy like termites on wood. By casting so many citizens out of that people that we've defined, we've poisoned the meaning of our democracy as a whole. And don't get me wrong, I love that story of the struggle, the heroic campaigns to restore rights for the Americans who were left out. They're so inspiring. It's a story of an electorate that just keeps expanding. But what if we didn't have to expand? What if every citizen just knew in their bones that the right to vote is something they just have without ever being questioned? What if the franchise was all of our birthright? We can and we must imagine this better world. We must think of the right to vote as universal and irrevocable. Just before he died, John Lewis wrote a final essay to be published posthumously with his last wishes for us all. In it, he wrote that democracy is not a state, it is an act. He passed the torch to us, saying each generation must do its part to help build what we call the beloved community, a nation and world society at peace with itself. So my fellow citizens, I invite you this morning to take our place in the ranks as we do that work of reimagining democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Grayson, for sharing your thoughts with us today. We are so proud to know you and to have you as part of our community. As she said earlier, she will be on with us on Zoom. And I want to thank Lisa while I have the mic to myself. She is helping our church be involved with this very important work. Our hymn is number 128, For All That Is Our Life. So our joys and sorrows will be handled on Zoom today, so please join us there. Our closing words are from Barack Obama. You see, the challenges we face will not be solved in one meeting, in one night. Change will not come if we wait for some other person or if we wait for some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek. We are the hope of those who have so little who've been told that they cannot have what they dream, that they cannot be what they imagined. Yes, they can. We are the hope of the future, the answer to the cynics who tell us our house must stand divided, that we cannot come together, and that we cannot remake this world as it should be. As our gathering ends, we will extinguish the flame in our chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts wherever we go. Go in peace, go in service to others, go in love.
Go now in peace, go now in peace, but vote as if our lives depend on it. Everywhere, anywhere you